Hello. Here are a couple of episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark that I have actually seen. Room for Rent and the Ghastly Grinner. Ghastly Grinner is clearer in my mind, but um, there were a few clues in Room for Rent. So it begins. Kiki, I guess, is late to the meeting, and she's running up, or she thinks she's late, but they haven't started yet because Sam has to finish writing a birthday card for her grandmother, uh, and um, and so, but it of course ties in because her whole thing is if you don't. Uh, Oftentimes ghosts they come back because they have unfinished business. There's something they didn't get around to before they died that they have to get back to. So um, I believe that Jessie, and did I ever write down the name of the other girl? Jessie and her friend. Maybe I'll come across the other girl's name in the notes. The notes are not easy to find stuff in, but I go in order, so it helps. So Jessie is the main little girl, and she's got a friend. And then Simpson, Sarah Simpson, is a fortune teller and someone who in the neighborhood is considered quite weird. Uh, Jessie, I think, I forget the details. I don't think she's parentless, but she's living with her grandfather, at least temporarily, perhaps for the summer or something. And he has moved his sleeping quarters downstairs in the house because he has trouble with stairs. It happens. It'll happen to me probably soon. Um, but so he wants to rent to bring in some extra money. He wants to rent his bedroom, and she doesn't want to do this, um, she she does, and she does. She likes to keep busy. This is how Sam introduces her. She likes to keep busy. It doesn't really play out for the whole episode, but it starts with she likes to keep busy, so she does chores for everybody in the neighborhood. And we first see her mowing the lawn for the fortune teller. And so later that evening, after she's had this conversation with her grandfather, she has to go pick up the money that the fortune teller owes her because I guess when she was actually there, the fortune teller was busy telling a fortune. Um, she goes with her friend, whose name, unfortunately, I did not write down. I could look it up, but it would take time, and it's not easy. It's not interesting to watch. Not that I'm interesting to watch, but it's even less interesting to watch if I'm not talking. And They get there, and they look in the window, and the fortune teller's in a trance. And then there's a blue beam comes down through her ceiling, and a ghost teleports down through the blue beam, and then walks out through the front wall, right past Jessie and friend. I don't even know if the friend's name is mentioned. It probably is, and I just missed it. So naturally, the next day, that ghost arrives at the at Jessie and her grandfather's house, and because he wants to rent the room, and he is offered tea. Says, "I don't drink tea." And he said it kind of the same way that Dracula says, "I never drink wine" in the Bela Lugosi version. So I think that was a tip of the hat there. As I have often said, everyone imitates Bela Lugosi. So Jessie sees his hand go through a picture when he's looking through the room, and she realizes, oh, this is a ghost. She kind of recognizes him, and his name is John Browning, the ghost's name. And she tries to tell her grandfather. Grandfather, of course, doesn't believe her. She and her friend had tried to tell her grandfather they'd seen the ghost arrive in the first place. But they had also just come from a zombie movie. I think it was a zombie movie, a double showing of a zombie movie, and it was late at night. And so he thought, yeah, it's your imagination running away. So, standard stuff. But they go back to Sarah Simpson and tell her what they saw and hopefully get the money from her. And she says that it's a ceremony, and it has to happen before the full moon that she was doing. She was doing her trance, and there were candles and everything, because it gives spirits a chance to handle unfinished business. But they cannot, and she then has to open the portal upon the full moon so that the spirits can return, otherwise they wander endlessly. But she says that the spirits cannot, um, they don't have real bodies, which is probably why he turned down the tea, because if he drinks the tea, well, he can't even lift the cup, because his hand would just go through things. It's that standard non-corporeal thing, ghost thing, where they can't touch anything except the floor they're standing on, because they don't sink through the floor. So let's see, where did so she says, since they don't have real bodies, in order to do the thing they need to do, they have to possess someone who has a physical body. And this is kind of where the episode loses its logic, because the ghost has been moving around and interacting with people this whole time, and I can see this ghost just has a message to deliver. I can see it being a problem if the ghost wanted to murder somebody. Although in the movie Ghost, Patrick Swayze demonstrates that you don't necessarily have to. Well, he does get some physical, being able to move physical things. But you should watch the movie Ghost. It's very good. But this ghost just has a message, and I'm gonna give away the ending when I get to the ending, but I'm giving away the ending now. He could have done this and then gone right back up in the portal, because he can talk to people. In fact, he does talk to the person he's there to talk to immediately after he releases the body that he does take over of Jesse's grandfather. So anyway, there's the standard "Are you afraid of the dark?" things happen. The girls, they're having a sleepover. They witness the ghost hovering over Gramps' body, but then they tell him about it in the morning. He doesn't believe them. They go into the room. The ghost warns them. So again, he can talk to people. They after they see him hovering and they scream, they run back to the room, push a desk in front of it, and then he just pokes through, because he's a ghost, pokes through the door, and warns them not to get in his way. Grandfather doesn't believe them, and then they all go into the bedroom that's been rented, which he's there too, but I guess he can go up the stairs. He just doesn't want to have to, just to go to bed. So that's not one of the logic problems in the episode. But the ghost does not seem to have been in bed at all. But then they go in through the closet. A hat box falls down. It's full of old pictures that must be important, because otherwise that wouldn't be in the episode. But the girls just, they put it back up, put it away, and then they go to sleep. And they seem to be sleeping on the porch in the next scene. They seem to have woken up from having slept on the porch. Maybe they just didn't want to be down the hall from the ghost. And then Gramps is going to Legion Hall, which is something that he does. So they pay another visit to Sarah Simpson, still trying to figure out what's going on. And it turns out they see a picture of her and Jesse's grandfather and the ghost from all those years ago. The ghost, it turns out, was her fiancé. But then she fell in love with someone else while he was away at war, and she tells the story of how the grandfather was in a plane that was going down. He was the pilot, and John Browning, Jacob is actually the real name. There's only one parachute, and so the grandfather thought he was saving the guy by ordering him to jump out of the airplane, because the airplane was going to crash, and there was only one parachute. The parachute failed, and the plane didn't crash. And so the ghost now blames him for not having been able to go back and marry the woman he loved. So Sarah Simpson goes over, and I don't know what her motivation for going over to Grandpa's house was, but they end up fighting, and then they end up fighting about Jacob being back from the dead. He still doesn't believe it, and it's a painful memory, of course, for him. So the Hatbox photos then come back into play. The ghost ends up taking over Grandpa's body and then goes over to visit Sarah Simpson. The girls run there too. He says he's going to take over the body permanently because Grandpa had a life, and now he wants to have his life with her. Why didn't he try sooner is something that I wrote down, because this potentially, I guess, probably could have happened around any full moon, and it would have been perhaps better on his side of things if it were younger. But Sarah explains the situation and what really happened. It wasn't how he perceived it. And then, Sam is the name of the grandfather, but I still don't know the name of the other girl. And so Sam tried to save. He understands this now, and then she reveals that she really loved Sam. But I guess that when Sam came back, he was too broken up, and he blamed himself for the death of her fiancé, that things couldn't work out. But going forward, it looks like they're going to, and there's kind of a moment like the end of the movie Ghost, as the ghost of Jacob is going back up through the portal, and I don't know how the portal opened because she wasn't in a trance, but whatever. He says, I've always loved you, Sarah. So that was what was there to do, and he could have done that without taking over another person's body. And I think that was what I remembered, although, come to think of it, I might just be remembering the end of Ghost. So maybe I didn't see that episode. But not a great one. But the Ghastly Grinner I definitely saw. So there's this kid who is frustrated that his career as a comic book artist has not taken off. And usually you see that kind of frustration in kids only when they are Juilliard students, or Juilliard has turned them down at the age of 13 or 14. And typically this is musicians I'm talking about. I have a problem with 10-year-old musicians going to Juilliard. Juilliard's pre-college program, sure, but they should go through all of high school and then go to college, whether that college is Juilliard or SUNY Geneseo. Anyway, logs. Oh, the logs are wet at the beginning. So I was describing the beginning of the story. Now I'm describing the beginning of the episode. The logs are wet, and for the Midnight Society, and they're not lighting. And so Kiki tries rubbing two sticks together, and Tucker's got a comic book, and it's the last story was Sam's. This story is Betty Ann's. And he's being teased about the comic book, etc. And apparently, and the flames do eventually come up on the wet logs, presumably from Kiki's efforts, but it seems magical at the time, I think, from the context. But I forget what that context was. Maybe it's just Kiki's sticks rubbing together. But then Betty Ann holds on to the comic, and she says, what if comic books are a guide to another dimension? So the Ghastly Grinner, I'll get to that. So now, the beginning of the story is what I described. The kid feels like he should have a career as a comic book artist. He's been inundated with rejections, and we join him. It's a stormy night, and he's got all the rejections. He's tearing them up. He's pulling things down from his walls. He's very frustrated, and then he finds an invitation to, I guess, the grand opening of Comic Book Inc., something like that. I guess a new comic book store. And he goes to it, and the woman running it, Frankie, says that he draws like Sylvester Uncas, who was a great comic book artist who apparently only drew one comic, or maybe it was only one comic of this particular thing, but he created the Ghastly Grinner, whose laugh reduces its victims to giggles with blue slime coming out of their mouths. Very disturbing. The Ghastly Grinner is kind of the Joker, but he dresses like Harley Quinn, crossed with one of the people who guards the Pope in Vatican City, who kind of, their outfit look kind of like clown outfits. Same coloring as that, kind of the light blue and the darkish yellow. So that's the Ghastly Grinner. He's the Joker crossed with Harley Quinn, crossed with, I forget what they're called. Swiss Guard, I think, is what they're called. And there's only one copy of the first issue, and she makes a gift of it to this kid whose name... Did I ever write down his name? I must have. She calls him Cakes, but that can't be his real name. I'm just going to... This time I am, because that's just too much information to not have. Tale of the Ghastly Grinner, Googling, And the actor is someone I knew, because the actor is in other things, but among those things, he's in Amos Crawley is the actor. And Ethan is the name, now I remember it. But Amos Crawley, I was thinking, I remember you from something. He's in Are You Afraid of the Dark? He's in a bunch of things. But then I remembered from around that same time, he played one of Adam Sandler's nerdy friends in, I think, the high school portion of Billy Madison. So he didn't have a lot of screen time, but he was one of the guys who, he might even have been the guy who has the line that sends Billy Madison on his, no, that's the teacher. That's Veronica Vaughn. But he's one of the guys who's being made fun of. No, he has the line, I think, where he says, "We're the guys who were made fun of before you got here," which sends Billy Madison back to Veronica, all sad because he's being made fun of, and then she says, "Well, maybe you weren't so nice to people your first time through," and then he starts calling people, most notably Steve Buscemi. Anyway, it was a necessary tangent to go on, because I needed to find out the kid's name, and that connection I really liked. Ethan Wood is his name, and he draws like Sylvester Uncas, and she calls him Cakes, I forget why, Frankie does, and she makes him a gift of the only issue of the Ghastly Grinner, and he's enthralled by it. It's interesting comic. He's reading it during science class, and the science teacher takes it, drops it in the fish tank, getting it all wet. Instead of letting it dry naturally, he puts it in the microwave, and then he leaves the room because his parents are calling him or something. I think he's got a phone call from her name. I did write down Hooper Picadoro, because she says it over and over again. It's I'm Hooper Picadoro. I sit across from you in class. I have glasses and the sweater. I guess I'm kind of a nerd. She says that repeatedly in the episode. That's why he abandons the microwave, and the whole house, or the whole kitchen, I guess it's the kitchen, it has a ton of plugs, plugged into plugs, plugged into plugs, plugged in the outlet in the wall, and so I think it just overdoes everything, overheats. The microwave explodes, but the comic only really has a hole in it. But I guess it's a magic comic, because what happens is the Ghastly Grinner escapes and attacks Ethan's parents, who then have the giggles and they have the slime coming out of their mouths, and they're awful people to begin with. I don't know why they had to be such awful people to begin with, because then there's further for them to go. But Hooper says, "Did your house just explode?" on the other end of the phone. His parents, their laughs start to ooze, and so he runs out of the house, and then runs into Hooper, in the front yard, and they're hiding behind the bushes. He's explaining to her what happened, and then her parents apparently are visiting his parents. Presumably, they are going to become giggling slime people too. Let's see. What is that? Roush Bob. I don't know. Hooper's parents. No. Oh. As his parents are welcoming Hooper, they're back to seeming normal, and they are welcoming Hooper's parents into the house, and they say, "Uncle Bob has just arrived," or something like that. Hooper says something. Something. I don't believe this fantasy type thing. Probably something along those lines. And then Ethan says, "Yeah, well, I don't have an Uncle Bob." And so they get on a bus. Bus driver does the turning head around thing. I think he's actually the Ghastly Grinner, because he laughs and the ooze comes out of his mouth. But I don't know if it's I don't know if they are familiar with the bus driver or what. Then the bus goes a little haywire, but it doesn't kill them. It doesn't crash and kill them. And they, Enkansian theory. So they get off the bus safely, and they go back to the comic book shop with Frankie, and I think Frankie's the one who explains the Enkansian theory or something like that. which is essentially the same plot point from Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where comic book artists have to, or creative storytellers have to keep telling stories about demons so that they don't escape. This is kind of a version of that. Uncas wrote the Ghastly Grinner comic to trap the Ghastly Grinner in it, but then the microwave blew it up. So what Frankie wants, Frankie's Uncas's daughter, she wants Ethan to finish the comic and thereby kill the Grinner, who then shows up and grabs her, and now she's in trouble. So Hooper keeps introducing herself. I already mentioned that. She says there's a big microwave ray in the science building, and they can use that because the microwave is what got him out in the first place. They go to the science building. Hooper's plan doesn't work. The science teacher ends up getting ghastly grinned, and Ethan just realizes he has to actually finish the comic. So he sits down, he draws some things. On the bus, they realize that they are in the comic now, and the comic is narrating there. So it's kind of like that, the one with the babysitter who had the book that was filled in as the babysittees did the thing. And I also wrote down that the Amos Crawley guy, he was the first voice of Arnold on the Magic School Bus, the original Arnold. So Hooper has no sense of humor, and so the Ghastly Grinner isn't effective against her. Ethan draws himself as a superhero, and then he kind of collides with the Ghastly Grinner. They both disappear. And long story short, he rescues both Uncuses from out of the comic, and then with, I guess, microwave within the comic, defeats the Grinner, and then Hooper erases the Grinner from the comic, thereby, I think, killing him once and for all. It's a chaotic ending, but good episode, better than Room for Rent. So that's that. And now the next two, The Tale of the Fire Ghost. I don't recall it from its title, but it must be the antithesis of The Tale of the Frozen Ghost. And then The Tale of the Closet Keeper. So those two next, and then very excited for the return of Jewel State in The Tale of the Unfinished Painting, but that's a couple of viewings from now. In the meantime, pleasant dreams, everyone.